So, Tom, if you could just start off telling us a little bit about the Wallich and your role within the Wallich, that'd be great if you would.
Absolutely, yeah. So the Wallich, we are a homelessness charity in Wales. We're the leading homeless and rough sleeping charity here. We're really proud. We deliver a wide range of services addressing homelessness in Wales. So we've been operating since 1978, and throughout that time, we've sort of grown in size, and probably more so in the last sort of 10, 15 years than ever before. It means we operate across the whole of Wales in a load of different local authorities, providing support for about 10,000 people on a year-to-year basis. We ultimately we want to create a Wales where people are standing together to provide hope, support, and solutions to end homelessness. We really strongly believe that everyone deserves the right to a home, but more than that, that everyone deserves the right to feel safe where they are, to feel valued, and to feel positive about their future. So we look to achieve that vision by getting people off the street, keeping people off the street, and creating opportunities for them. I'm the director of people and talent here. I've been in various roles over the last 14 years during my time at the organisation, but in the current role as director, it means that I have oversight of our people team, our resourcing team, talent development, and also now our business system functions as well. So quite a wide-ranging remit as it stands nowadays.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's obviously really, really important work that you do at the charity as well. And it's great for us to support somebody with such great cause that you're doing, really. So that's fantastic. So thinking back to the project then, what were the problems that you was having and what was you trying to address?
Yeah, so we've had an HR information system previously. The provider that we were with prior to moving over to Access we'd been with since 2013. And so we were sort of coming towards the end of, I suppose, a 3-year contract block. And looking back, having been with that provider for 10 years, we were quite substantially different as an organisation towards the end of that 10-year period than we had been at the start when we started with them. In that time as well, I think technology had advanced quite significantly as well. And we were starting to, I suppose, outgrow slightly the functionality that was available on the system that we were using. And it didn't feel, as we sort of got towards the end of that contract period, that it quite matched up anymore with what we wanted from a system. And we wanted something that maybe was a little bit more modern, a little bit more dynamic with the way that it worked, and could provide, I suppose, greater insights to sort of the people data across the organisation and our payroll data than maybe what we were getting from the current provision. So we sort of had that as our main reason for sort of wanting to look out, and we challenged them as a provider as well in terms of, well, can you meet our need, or is it another that's going to do that? And we developed quite a fairly detailed spec that we sent out to a number of providers in terms of what we wanted to see from a system, and sort of throughout all of that, adding value to the business was a major part of what we wanted to do there. And I think we'd come to a point where maybe the value we were getting from the current system wasn't quite the value that we could get from a similar spend elsewhere.
Brilliant, really insightful that, Tom. And yeah, so looking at that then, obviously did a really diligent buying process, reviewed lots of different vendors out there, had real detailed requirements of what you wanted from a system and what you wanted to achieve. So having gone through that, what made you choose Access at the end?
Yeah, I think you're right. We spoke to 15 different providers. I think we sent that spec out to, and we ended up seeing a good 6 or 7, if not more, demonstrations from various different systems that are there. And I think you'll always find when you're looking at those, there's going to be aspects of each of them that you're like, I really like that. That's fantastic. And I think in an ideal world, you would pick the best parts of all of those and put them together. It's not realistic. That's not necessarily how it's going to be. So we always went into this process knowing that we wanted to achieve as much as we could across that spec, but that we were never going to achieve absolutely every part of that spec because it's an unrealistic aspiration, I think. But what we felt, I think, when we saw People XD, because I think if you remember, when we first came to you, we were saying, oh, People HR looks really good, and we think that's what we would want. And you came back to us and said, actually, with sort of the range of things that you're looking at, People XD as your product is probably the better bet. And I think what we found is that it gave us the right balance between sort of those must-haves, those absolutely essentials that we wanted to have, the really would like elements that we were like, if we could get this in a system, would be very very pleased. They're not essential, but it'll be disappointing if we don't have them. And those, wouldn't they be nice bits as well, that we're like, if we can, yeah, if that happens, that would be fantastic, but we're not going to lose any sleep over those. And I think what we saw with People XD and the broader range of packages that can come alongside the access groups pieces was just how we could hit as many of those as we possibly could, without sort of overcomplicating things and making it a behemoth that we were taking on.
Brilliant, really insightful that, Tom. And I think I speak to lots of customers that were, as you said, when you went out to market in the first place, you had exactly what you wanted from each kind of product set and things like that. And I speak to a lot of customers that we've gone for the best ever HR system, the best ever payroll system, and the best ever recruitment system, best ever screening system, and so on from so on. And they've gone the absolute best of breed, but actually what they've ended up with is a Frankenstein. So they've got all these things sewn together, not that well sewn together, each do everything independently very well, but as a system or an ecosystem talking to each other just doesn't do that. So yeah, it's good to see that we could shine through, maybe not be best of breed on absolutely everything, but kind of give you that best of breed approach in one system, really. So yeah, great to hear that. So you've gone through that buying process, you saw access, they hit most of the, well, all of the must-haves and most of the nice-to-haves and things like that. Have you had any benefits then since going live in the system, and any outcomes that you've realised?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest benefits for us is, much as like you just said, actually, is bringing some of those systems together that maybe previously were separated from each other. So we had our previous HR system, but we also had a previous payroll system. And what we took on from Access was that combined payroll piece, payroll and HR piece. And what that has allowed us to do, what's made me happy within that process, is that the data that me coming from an HR point of view is talking about with my finance director, it's the same data. There's no longer sort of variations between, oh yeah, well on our system we put it under that code, or on our system it, it comes out and calculates at that amount. We are talking about the same numbers every time we have those conversations, and I think that just gives us confidence in the data that maybe at times in the past we've not necessarily had. And I think it makes all of our decision making feel that little bit more solid when we know that we're talking about exactly the same thing there. But I suppose on a day-to-day basis, one of the things that has really made a difference for us is just the speed of processes. So if I take like occupational sick pay as an example, something that straddles both the HR and the finance field of things, as well as having an implication on the way that our managers operate and the data that they're putting into the system. Previously, that as a process for us used to be, a 2 or 3 days worth of very manual calculating, things being recorded on sort of printed calendars, and days being marked off as to the entitlements that people had of full pay and half pay and the like. And it was very much open to interpretation and error, human error. And even with the best of intent, when you're sort of dealing with the best part of 500 different people on a month-to-month basis, and the various sicknesses and the like that they're going to have, errors will creep in with that. So the fact that that's now automated, that we've been able to set up sort of the entitlements in the background, we've dictated to the system how we want that to operate. It means that that's just happening as we go through sort of the month. That now happens, and actually the time that we spend on checking that is via exception as opposed to every single one. And again, it gives us confidence that things are being done accurately, but it also just saves an immense amount of time in terms of what we're having to spend our time on to make sure that payroll is ready to go each month. I suppose finally, the one of the other major outcomes that we've seen from it is just the ease of access of the data as well. So whereas previously we would have to take data out of the HR system and out of our payroll systems, do a little bit of a sort of validation process to make sure that we were talking and thinking about the same data. But the way that our funding works is that we've got basically 22 different local authorities plus other funders that we report back to it, and they all want that reporting in a slightly different way. And there would have to be an awful lot of manual intervention into the reports that we were putting out to make sure that the data was formatted the way that we wanted it, but also divided down. Spending the time sort of through implementation and making sure that we had the right tags and divisions and subcategories selected against people means that those reports now are just so like easy for us to manipulate and to pull out exactly the data we want, be it against sort of the category of staff we are or the setting that they're working in, that now has just taken away again a huge amount of work that was going on a monthly basis to prepare reports and to send them in. We spend more time building those reports now and getting them right and making sure that they are what we want to put out from the system, and then unleashing them and letting people have access to them and letting people use them, knowing now that they're getting the data that they need to get. So the time's being spent on the right place, and it means that we aren't repeating that same process every single month, because once that's been built, it's there and it's good to go. So it really, for me, it sort of all of those three pieces, it's just a massive time saver having something that works as well as what this system does.
Oh, fantastic. And that's what we want to hear is, okay, we've got a new system, it's got all the bells and whistles on, doesn't it look great, but actually what is it giving to your business? And for you, it's very clear it's made a massive impact, hasn't it? So that's great. Thinking of when we spoke, when you started the project, probably, I'm trying to think how long it was now, 18 months, maybe 2 years ago. Yeah. If you start the project again, is there anything you'd do differently? Any advice you'd give to any other customers that are speaking to me at the moment in the same boat that you was in 18 months or so ago?
Yeah, I think the implementation team are always very clear that we need to dedicate a lot of time to UAT and to testing. And I think we dedicated a decent amount of time, but on reflection, I'd want to double that probably. I'd want to spend more time testing. I think what we could have done more testing around was sort of our payroll element and the various absence scenarios, because for me, they're the ones that on a month-to-month basis make a difference to people's pay, and we want to make sure that every opportunity that they are correct. And we've had a couple of times where we've gone, we didn't set that quite as we intended to set that, and had we done a few more testing scenarios on that, then we would have known that that wasn't going to work quite the way we anticipated 3, 4, 5 months down the line than it did when we just sort of tested it out across sort of like one payroll run. I think timing came into that a little bit. So because we were coming to the end of a contract with a legacy system, we had to end in the February of that year. And it meant that the next system had to start in the February of that year, which is year end. So from a finance point of view, was probably one of the worst possible times we could have done that. If we could have delayed that, and we couldn't, because the contract was going to end and we couldn't extend by only a couple of months, so it had to happen at that point. But if there was a way in the future that if I was doing this again, I could manipulate that so that it didn't happen at that point in time. We also sort of hit the perfect storm of a little bit of change going on in that department and the like, and it just meant that again, the amount of testing that we did there, we sort of had to, we contracted a bit of that out to a third party in the end for them to come and do. So we knew the system was going to work in the way that it had been set up, but I think had we done a little bit more testing there ourselves, we probably would have understood some of our more like Wallich idiosyncrasies that I think a third party would find it difficult to understand and put into place there for us to test through. So I think time is always going to be the big one with this. And depending on the number of modules that you take on, you need to clear the diary. You need to be spending. And then sort of I took the project lead for us on that, and it dominated my life for the 3 or 4 months that we were going through doing that implementation. But I think that's essential. You absolutely have to do that. And if you think you're just going to sort of tag it on to the end of the day, here, there, and everywhere, it's not going to work as well as you want to. Put the time in there, you will reap that reward into the future when things are working the way that you want them to.
I think our implementation team would say exactly the same thing as well. It's not something you can do in your dinner hour. You do need to dedicate time to it. And I suppose that's the things with going with a highly configurable system as well. So if you get a tier 3 type solution, it doesn't have much configurability in it, so it can't configure itself to your nuances and your idiosyncrasies within the business. It kind of just does what it does, doesn't need a lot of testing, where XD has got so many configuration switches in it, which is great, but you need to do a lot of testing to get through on there. And I think, as you say, obviously running out of time with the existing, I speak to so many customers where our contract expires in 6 months, and we're going, well, by the time you've looked, you've selected, you're running out of time. So you really need to be looking kind of a year ahead of when your contract expires, things like that, which it's great to know now, Tom, but fingers crossed it's information you won't ever need to know, because you'll be staying with XD for another 10 or 20 years as such. So Good stuff. So just looking at the scope of the project then, so it started off very much as a HR project with recruitment and possibly learning on there, and actually as part of the selection process that expanded and included the payroll, the talent management on there, also the Premier Success Plan. I see since going live, you then opted for the access screening solution as well. What's next for you? I think you've taken pretty much everything.
Yeah. But I think the big part for us now is to start to utilize some of the functionality that sits within the system that just needs us to spend a little bit more time on it. So we've not spent a great deal of time turning on all the IQs that we can. And that's what we're doing right now, so that we're starting to go, right, you as managers, you as staff, you're putting a lot of information into the system. We're now going to start to provide you with the data that generates, so that you can start to make better informed decisions around your sort of day-to-day working practices. And I'm looking forward to that. The absence management point of view, that it's going to be great to start putting those pieces of data back in front of managers. But also there's just some nice things that we can do with those as well. So we've turned on now with sort of our own graphics attached to it as well, like birthday cards that go out, and anniversary congratulations when we sort of hit like 3, 5, 10 and 20 years and stuff like that. So there's the business side of it, where it's like, great, we can start to manage our absence better because people will be better informed with better data. But there's also the slightly friendlier bits that we can put in there as well, so that people know that, all right, we're not of a size where I can necessarily send out a birthday card or birthday email to absolutely everyone in the organization, because it would be my whole time every day doing that. But knowing that we're thinking about people's birthdays and stuff like that, and they're going to get something from the organization to say happy birthday, those types of things I think can go a long way as well in terms of engaging our workforce.
Yeah, massively. So you can't put a price on that either, can you? It's not a direct ROI, but it's a great feel-good factor, and it's great that technology can aid you with that as well. So yeah, really, really great to hear. Really great to hear that kind of implementation's an ongoing thing, isn't it? So you go live on your absolute must-have for go live. You've had massive business wins from that already, and now you're looking at perfecting that, putting the cherry on the top. And as you know, with the system, it's constantly evolving. We're constantly pushing out new functionality. So yeah, we're here to support you, especially with your Premier Success Plan, and your Premier Customer Success Manager is helping you get the most out of the software all the time. So yeah, it's great to hear that we've got the foundation bits in, and now we're really going to start putting the cherries on and turn all the bells and whistles on and things like that. So that's great. So yeah, thank you ever so much for your time, Tom. It's really, really appreciated today, and great to hear the feedback, and look forward to catching up again in the future and see what new changes you've made and other things you've gone for.
Great, no problem at all. Nice to speak with you.